Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. You guys know what time it is? Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And for those of you who like these type of videos, please remember to click like down below. If you aren't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. But a number of my subscribers have awared me that Jeff Cavalier, aka Athlean-X, has made a video that I will actually like and agree with. And I went and checked it out. Lo and behold, Jeff has said that the deadlift will improve your pull-ups, that he puts it as a prerequisite for it. I like that. I like that a lot. And I don't always agree with Jeff on everything. And honestly, when his fangirls come in and they say this stuff like, oh, you can't criticize anything he says, you guys are ridiculous. You're absolutely ludicrous. You're absurd. You can criticize every coach and person out there. Okay? Absolutely can. In this case, though, I'm not going to criticize him. I think he was right, and I think he made a good point. Now, I did find it amusing. You guys know I've made jokes in the past about calling his skeleton Jesse. He started talking to the skeleton and calling it Jesse today. I don't know if that was a nod to me or some of my fans went over and were calling it Jesse and he picked up on that. I have no clue. But either way, I found it amusing just because I've done that in the past. So fair play to Jeff on that one. He can take a joke pretty well there. So credit where credit is due. So that being said, let's talk about what we mean by a deadlift there. Now, people are going to be like, oh, you powerlifters, oh, you just get excited every time someone mentions a deadlift. When I'm talking about a deadlift, I don't mean just a conventional powerlifting deadlift that you guys are thinking of, set to exactly, the plates exactly on the floor with a standardized plate with you there, because that's arbitrary. We know that. We know that the plate height, while it's been standardized for generations in the industry, the original plate height was an arbitrary number to determine the range of motion on a conventional deadlift. We know that. I understand that for optimal leverages, things vary for people. And I actually recommend to most people that you train multiple forms of the deadlift. You guys know that I personally, in the last training cycle alone, have done 6 different forms of deadlifts. Right, I trained 6 different types of deadlifts personally. Not one of them in this block has been a conventional deadlift, has it? You guys have seen me do sumo, seen me do deficit sumos on plates, sumos against bands, sumos against chains, deficit sumo with chains, deficit conventional on a 3-inch deficit, and then a 7th one. I've done trap bar deadlift for rep work. All right, so that's 7 forms of deadlifts I've done just in this last training phase. Those are all deadlifts. And I would say that irrespective of what your training goals are, if you want to be functional and you want to be strong, you need some sort of heavy hip hinge from the floor that you grip with your hands. That's what I'll define as a deadlift. And even these guys who say, well, I could replace it with a power clean. Well, if you can do a power clean correctly, if you can do a power clean correctly, but isn't that a deadlift? You are pulling a heavy weight from the floor with a hip hinge using your hands. Okay. It's a clean pull. It's called a clean type deadlift on the initial pull, but your initial pull from the floor is still a form of deadlift on a power clean. Okay. People need to understand that. That still falls within the category. I would argue the power clean is not your best choice for explosive training, and plenty of coaches have come up with better alternatives. And but that's neither here nor there. That's an entirely different topic. We've evolved in the strength and conditioning world to the point to where we don't need the Olympic lifts to develop explosiveness. We don't need them. They're not necessary in the modern world. We've found easier to train alternatives. So, that being said, it is still hip hinge from the floor. So that's what he's talking about. And I think we could make this all-encompassing. When Jeff is saying that, if you think about what he said is that even though, yes, it's from the floor and you're pulling, you are practicing getting stronger at pulling from the floor. And you're getting stronger at all the muscles involved. And he's right. He's absolutely right in that regard. And if you think about some of the other stuff he talked about, he even talked about, again, scapular strength. Well, what do you have to do on a deadlift? I mean, if we want to talk about, again, even developing good isometric strength for your scapula, the deadlift actually teaches that. So his third checklist is also partially covered by the second, and I'm not saying some people don't need some additional scapular work, but again, he kind of goes through a checklist, and there's just synergy in some of these things, because the first thing he covered was, well, you know, the stronger core and everything. Well, also we find that doing more core work makes your deadlift improve, doesn't it? Right? Having strong abdominals, strong erectors, and all those things will actually improve your deadlift. And if you can build a decent base on a deadlift starting, pull-ups are going to be a lot easier. Because that's one of the problems we have too. A lot of novices out there are just too weak to do a pull-up. Right? They're too weak to do a pull-up or a chin-up. They really are. They're not too weak to do a deadlift, because we can start with little bitty plates, right? I mean, we can have a point where we can start someone with 10-pound plate on each side. You can get ones big enough. You get the right training plates. You can get some little bitty training plates that are still full-size diameter. We can have someone deadlifting 55 pounds. And if they can't do that, then we can even do some Romanian deadlifts for a week or two to build their strength up to where they can pull a weight off the floor. Right? Someone doesn't have the mobility to reach the floor, we can do some block pulls. You could also do the same thing for someone who's not strong enough to pull the plates that you have. We could still set those up as a block. There's a lot you can do. You can take someone who's completely weak, and you can use the deadlift to build them to where they can do a pull-up. And use the deadlift where they can do a pull-up. And let's talk about, again, that scapular strength he's talking about. You have to learn to retract your scapula to pull correctly from the floor. You have to. Because you go into scapular retraction before you pull off the floor, right? You build a lot of isometric strength there. That'll carry over to what he talked about on the third point on the checklist. And Jeff's absolutely right. If you have someone who's too weak to do a pull-up at all, and you start training them on deadlifts or deadlift variations, notice when I say deadlift, I want people to understand I do mean literally what we would think of as a deadlift from the floor. I don't mean the classic conventional deadlift. So again, let's make that point very, very clear, because your mileage is going to vary. A heavy hip hinge off the floor, heavy pull from the floor, okay? Build a base on that. Any variation of it. Build a base on that. And if you're not strong enough to do a pull-up, you're suddenly going to find yourself strong enough to start doing pull-ups. Because we come over to the other point, if you're only strong enough to do one pull-up, are we going to build much off of that? Probably not. I mean, if a single rep is an all-out max for you, and we're not doing max effort training, that's probably still not a good use of your resources. You're going to still need to do something like a reverse band pull-up, which I don't believe in the assist machines. I think they're garbage. I don't think they should exist. I would scrap those things given a choice. Use a band, right? Use a band to do an assisted pull-up. All right, problem solved. Use a band. Cheaper, takes less space, you use the same pull-up bar. And it'll carry over better the same movement pattern. All right, for even someone like that, they can use those as well. And before long, they're going to be able to crank out pull-ups. But I would say, let's come over and talk about training effect for novices. You're not strong enough to do at least 5 pull-ups. There's no point even doing the normal exercise. There's no point doing the classic pull-up exercise so you can do 5 of them with a full range of motion. You're going to need to find alternatives. The deadlift is the alternative. The deadlift will build it up. And then obviously your second choice is doing pull-ups with a reverse band looped under you. But deadlift first and foremost. Use deadlifts. It will build it up. And Jeff's absolutely right. It will build most of the musculature involved, and it carries over to everything. This is one reason I tell people deadlifting is essential. It's an essential movement pattern. Okay? It is an essential movement pattern for just basic functional strength. And you need to find a variation you can do. If you're not built to do a specific variation, you can manipulate this stuff. And if you have a mobility issue, you can adjust all of that. Okay, there's a lot we can work with here. And as you become a more advanced lifter and you build mobility, because that's the problem, is that people will use these scenarios of people who have limited mobility to say, well, they can't do this or that. Well, you build that. Because as you get more advanced, and I mean advanced, I mean as in training age, because I'm a middle-aged guy, and I don't have any problem doing heavy variations and all sorts of different ranges of motion on the deadlift. I do deficit work. That's harder. That requires even more mobility. Deficit sumos, okay? But these different variations are really what you need. As you get more advanced, you should be training multiple types of deadlifts. That's my opinion, says me. But the novice lifter should find one that they can do and focus on it, learn it, build a base at it. And if you do that, that will improve your pull-ups. That'll improve your pull-ups. So in this case, without even getting into everything that Jeff covered, you look at his initial checklist, and for most of you guys, even the first 5 minutes of his video really tells you what most of you need to know just to start building a base to be able to do pull-ups if you can't do them. And I'm going to agree with that 100%. But I just like the fact that he did bring up the point that a deadlift, because again, it carries over to a lot of things, you can build a pull-up off of a deadlift. You can build pull-up off of deadlifting. Alright guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.